autumn of 1099, the armies of the First Crusade captured the city of Jerusalem. Beneath the most sacred ground in the known world, in vaults that had not been opened in living memory, the Knights Templars made a discovery. What they found has never been fully described in any surviving record. What they choose to do with it has defined every year of human history since. This is the record of the world that followed that choice. The world in which the gates of hell have stood open for 815 years. A world in which roughly 1/3 of all humanity has pledged itself formally and irrevocably to the dominion of hell. A world in which two great walls, one of stone and faith, and one of divine and iron, represent the last organized resistance against forces that do not age, do not tire, and have stated no interest in concluding this war quickly. A world in which, as of the year 1914, both sides are preparing for what military analysts can only describe as a decisive offensive. Neither side has won a decisive engagement in 800 years. To understand what this world is, it is necessary to understand what it was before 1099, and what changed in that year, and why the change has proven impossible to reverse. The First Crusade captured Jerusalem in July of 1099. This much is consistent across all surviving accounts. What the official histories of the Church have been less forthcoming about is what the Knights Templar found in the weeks following the city's capture. During their systematic survey of the ground beneath the Temple Mount, the vaults they discovered were ancient. Their origin is not established by any account, and the record has been able to verify it, at least a little. Within those vaults was an artifact. The nature of the artifact is not described in any surviving document within sufficient clarity to record here. What is documented consistently across multiple independent accounts written in the years immediately following the events is the account it had on the men who found it. The Knights Templar were the most celebrated military order in Christendom. They had taken vows of poverty, chastity, and absolute obedience to God. They had crossed continents in the service of those vows, and they had bled for them. But upon entering those vaults, they made a different choice. The theological designation for what followed is the first heresy. The practical designation is simpler. The Templars began trafficking with devils. They conducted rituals whose names do not appear in this record for reasons the reader should understand without elaboration. They made agreements whose terms have never been fully disclosed, and the barrier between the mortal plane and the infernal one, already stressed by whatever was contained in those vaults, began to fail. Jerusalem did not fall to the heretics. Jerusalem ceased to exist as a city. The cataclysm that accompanied the opening of the gates of hell on earth destroyed the holy city completely, not militarily, not physically. The ground where it stood became and remains a junction point between the mortal world and the infernal domain of hell. The air above it carries properties that have been proven to be lethal to the faithful at close range. And the gate itself, the physical aperture through which the armies of hell have been imagined for 8 centuries, stands where the temple once stood. The armies of the church retreated from the region in 1099, and they have been attempting to return ever since. The Templar accounts, such fragments as were recovered before the Order's dissolution, suggest that the knights who committed the first heresy believed, or told themselves they believed, that what they had found was a superior form of divine wisdom, that they were not abandoning God, but advancing beyond the limited understanding of their superiors. The record notes this without comment. What followed the events of 1099 was not, in the conventional sense, a war. Wars have defined objectives. Wars have terms under which they conclude. What followed the opening of the gates was a condition, a permanent state of armed conflict between mortal civilization and the forces emerging from an aperture in reality that no human agency has yet found a means of closing. The record covers the significant developments by dates. In 1101, the year of 3 battles, heretic forces, reinforced by the armies of the Third Circle of Hell, conquered most of the Levant. The ancient city of Antioch became the principal point of faithful resistance in the region. In 1109, the great sultanate of the invincible iron wall of the two horns that pierced the sky was formally established. The Islamic faithful, responding to what theological scholars within the sultanate describe as a direct divine intervention, gathered behind the mastered iron walls of Du al-Kanyan in the lands of the Sultan of Rome. The migration of the faithful to that position, described in Sultanate records as second in significance only to the Hijrah of the Prophet himself, cost millions of lives in transit. Heretic forces and their infernal lords attacked the migration columns endlessly and continuously. The wall was reached. The gates were closed. Two great powers now stood against hell. They have not fully trusted each other since 1099, when Christian knights opened the gates in the first place. In 1117, 17 members of the faithful undertook a mission into the earthly domains of hell. Their stated objective was the conversion of the heretics through direct theological engagement. Their departure writings, several of which survive, indicate that they understood the likely outcome of this mission and proceeded regardless. They were captured upon entry into the infernal domains. They were subjected to extended torture. They were then sealed alive inside brazen bulls, metal structures, enclosed and heated from without to temperatures that the body could not survive. The 17 martyrs did not die. They remained inside those enclosures, and they have been inside them for 800 years. In 1215, internal conflict within the church produced the wars of Triclavanianism. The faithful spent nearly a century fighting each other over theological differences, while the heretic domains expanded into the space the conflict created. Millions died. The heretic lines advanced significantly during this period and have never fully retreated to their pre-1215 positions. In 1346, Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, deployed what the record designates the Black Grail, a plague of infernal origin, carried by demonic insects bred in the 7th layer of hell, capable of spreading through any biological matter and converting it into a state between life and death. The infected remained conscious Yes, they retained consciousness. They retained the awareness of their condition, for they do not die of it. Tens of millions were infected in the initial deployment. The corpse wars, as the military engagements with the resulting animated masses came to be known, lasted 7 whole years. In 1426, the living saint, Jeanne d'Arc, drove the Black Griot from the mainland Europe. She succeeded completely. The record does not have verified information on what this accomplishment cost her personally. In 1545, the original city of Antioch was destroyed by an infernal weapon. The nature of that weapon remains classified by the church, and the garrison did not retreat from the ruins. They held that position for 50 years, in air contaminated by demonic essence, rising from the crater of the weapon that had left it behind, until New Antioch was completed in 1595. 50 years in the ruin of a destroyed city, in poisoned air, they held. In 1573, the Sacred Order of the Dragon halted the heretic advance through the hills of Wallachia. 1 million heretic soldiers were impaled in the aftermath. The advance did not resume from that direction. In 1894, the year of Broken Trinity, heretic death commandos, the elite assassination units raised from childhood in the 7th circle of hell, simultaneously killed the 3 most senior leaders of the faithful, the Supreme Pontiff, the High Prophetess Aelia, and the Holy Roman Emperor. All 3 assassinated in a single coordinated operation on the same day. The heretic legions launched their largest offensive in 2 centuries into the chaos that followed. But the line held. It is now 1914, and both sides are finalizing preparations for major offensive operations. Intelligence activities into no man's land has increased significantly in recent months. Both sides are moving relics, reinforcements, and specialized units into forward positions. 815 years since the gate opened. The record is current to this date. The following is a description of the physical world as it exists in 1914. The landscape around the gates, the region once called the Holy Land, has been 8 centuries under artillery and occupation of infernal influence. The earth in that region does not look like the earth that was once. Trenches cutting across craters, mud so deep and so permanent that men have vanished into it, never to be recovered again. Barbed wires in quantities that beggar description, rusting and multiplying across no man's land between the lines, catching things in them that the soldiers on watch have learned not to examine too closely in the dark. The sky above the front is not blue. It has not been blue in living memory for as long as anyone who has served on the line can remember. It is the color of smoke and distance, a permanent grey-brown that the men have stopped remarking on. Gas drifts through the lower ground in clouds that vary in color and in what they will do to those who breathe them in. Soldiers on the forward line wear iron capricots at all times, conical helmets with integrated gas masks. The mask protects the lungs, and the iron, properly consecrated, protects something the lungs cannot. There are sounds on this battlefield that do not belong in any war fought before the gates opened. The sounds one would expect are present and constant. The artilleries The percussion of shells landing in wet earth, familiar to veterans that they sleep through all but the closest impacts. Rifle fire in the dark. These have always been present in any war. They are, in their own terrible ways, the comfortable sounds of this place, because they are sounds that the body know how to respond to. The other sounds are different. On certain nights, when the wind is coming from the direction of the heretic lines, the singing of choristers carries across no man's land. These choristers are heretic soldiers in post-mortem condition, involving the severance of the head, which retains animation and vocal function. Their singing causes auditory hemorrhage in listeners exposed for more than approximately 90 seconds. Extended exposure causes permanent cognitive damage, and the military hospice of New Antioch contains a dedicated ward for soldiers affected by chorister exposure. That ward has never, in recorded knowledge, had its capacity reduced. When shrine anchorites advance, they are heard before they are seen. 12 to 15 feet of metal and diesel, smoke and prayer. The monk pilot inside operating the machine from a chamber lined with spikes and barbed hooks, in permanent physical torment, rejoicing in that torment because this world has produced a theology that finds meaning in suffering at a scale that conventional military psychology has no adequate framework to address. There is a third category of sound documented in the forward positions at irregular intervals, originating from the direction of Jerusalem. 17 independent accounts collected from soldiers who have served in the forward trenches describe it consistently as large and as belonging to no mechanical or biological sources that witnesses could identify. There are two great structures that anchor the geography of this conflict. New Antioch stands in the Levant as the last major fortress city of the church faithful in the region. For 300 years it has endured. 8 great sieges have been mounted against its walls. 8 times those walls have held. 77 towers of fortified stone with anchorites sealed within them, watching without sleeping, keeping a continuous watch through every hour of every night, without exception or interruption. The city operates continuously, its foundries burn white hot day and night, producing artillery and armaments. Its factories produce tanks and armored suits and specialized equipment at rates maintained without interruption for decades. Soldiers from every nation, faith, and tradition that still opposes hell serve within its walls and in the positions surrounding it. Polish cavalries, Ethiopian infantries, the remnants of the Varangian Guard, and volunteers from every corner of the faithful world who have served and have made their way to what is considered the forward edge of the entire conflict. The city speaks hundreds of languages simultaneously. The Office of the Propagation of Virtue patrols every district, turning a blind eye to the revelries of soldiers who may not live through the week, but persecuting heresy with absolute ferocity. The execution of heretics is a weekly event in New Antioch. It draws large crowds. Beyond the Levant, in lands that were once the Islamic Caliphate, before the heretics reduced them, stands the great iron wall of the Sultanate, divine in its origins, physical in its reality. It is the greatest defensive structure in the world. Behind it, the faithful of Islam have maintained their civilization, their scholarship, their alchemical sciences, while the world outside its protection have been reduced to contested killing grounds. The muezzin still calls the prayer, and the mosques of white marbles still stands. The wall has never been breached. The attacks against it have never stopped. Between these two structures, in the mud and the gas and the darkness that settles over no man's land, when both sides have silenced their artilleries long enough for a horrible kind of quiet to take hold. Millions of soldiers fight a war they did not start, for stakes they do not truly understand, and against an enemy that cannot die. This is the world as it stands. The record now turns to who fights in it. In this conflict, the sides do not map neatly into anything a historian of conventional wars would recognize. What follows is the record as it stands currently. The church fields two kinds of forces, and the distinction between them is important. The first is the organized military of the faithful, the armies of Antioch, and the nations that supply them. Soldiers trained and equipped in the conventional sense, wielding both action rifles, artilleries, and suits of armor imbued with divine light by the followers of Saint Eligius, patron of metal workers. Armor strong enough to withstand machine gun fire while remaining light enough to move in. These are professional soldiers fighting a professional war against an enemy that supplements its forces with demons. The second force the church fields is not professional and not organized, and not in any formal sense under church command. These are the trench pilgrims. Field reports from soldiers who have engaged both trench pilgrims and infernal forces in the same theater consistently note that the distinction in terms of psychological impact on the enemy is not as clear as military doctrines would prefer. They come from everywhere, men and women, marked by visions or by stigmata, the physical wounds of Christ appearing on their bodies without external cause, bleeding wounds that makes them stronger in close combat rather than weaker. Penitents who have committed sins they consider beyond ordinary forgiveness and have decided that the only acceptable penance is to cross no man's land on foot, armed with whatever they could find, and take as many of the enemy with them before they fall. The mad and the grief-stricken and the God-touched, gathering around prophets and prophetesses who have received visions they cannot ignore. They are not sanctioned by the Holy See, but the Holy See blesses their crusades anyway. They charge across no man's land in suicidal assaults, and they do not stop for bullets, they do not stop for gas, and they do not stop for the things that make trained soldiers question whether continuing is rational. Behind the pilgrim lines advance the shrine anchorites, those same metal behemoths 12 to 15 feet tall, diesel engines, belching smoke, exteriors covered in holy icons and relics. Inside each one, sealed permanently until death, is the monk operating the machine from a chamber designed to cause continuous physical suffering. The anchorites carry catwin wheels of adamantine as weapons. They carry bone breaker maces, and they have not been opened since the monks entered them. The Sultanate brings different capabilities to the field. The alchemists of the House of Wisdom practice a science called Takwin, the creation of artificial life, working from knowledge descended from the legendary Jabir ibn Hayyan and the forbidden books of Solomon. Their creations include The lions of Jabir, battle beasts that are unique, each one handmade by the alchemist who produced it. Each one imperfect in some way, because perfection is beyond even the most skilled practitioners of these arts. Some lions are malformed physically. Some are malformed in more difficult directions, having been produced with human-level intelligence, fully capable of understanding the nature of what they are and where they came from. The Sultanate also deploys the assassins of Alamut. The fortress of Alamut has been under siege for hundreds of years, and it has not fallen. From inside it, the Order of Assassins operates across the battlefield in ways no conventional military doctrine can adequately account for. They can appear in two places simultaneously. They can strike a target and then move backward in time by a few seconds to positions of safety before retaliation can reach them. Their blades carry a poison refined over generations of deliberate self-exposure, the accumulated inheritance of every assassin who came before them, growing more potent with each generation. A single touch of an unsheathed assassin's blade on unprotected flesh causes the body to blacken and rot from within over several seconds. These are the faithful. On the other side of no man's land stands the heretics. It is worthwhile to note that 1/3 of humanity has pledged itself into the service of hell. Not all were coerced. Many did in fact choose it. The heretic legions are raised from citizens of the damned who make pilgrimage to the burning bronze gates of the gate itself, approaching through a valley where the road is paved with wailing souls and lined with the charred bodies of those who were deemed insufficient and were left to suffer until the day of judgment. Those who reach the gates are considered worthy. They take vows. Their bodies are branded with the mark of the devil lord who claims them. Beyond these mortal soldiers, hell sends its own. The anointed are those who went further than the gates and have entered the inferno itself. Their flesh ignited on entry and never healed. They wear that burning as armor of a kind, the blackened and ruined exterior of bodies that have been to the shores of the lake of eternal fire and returned, somehow still functioning. Their eyes reflect flames that are no longer external. They carry weapons that ordinary soldiers could not lift. They are, in fact, the paragons of the heretic forces, and they are considered standard. Hell also deploys the choristers, as documented in the 4th entry of this record. The war beasts, creatures of possessed flesh that should not exist in any form that biology permits. The artillery witches, mobile in ways the artillery should not be mobile. The operational nature, the subject of a separate entry held elsewhere in this record. And then there are the death commandos, children, selected young and taken through the gates to be raised in the 7th circle of hell, trained in assassination by the damned souls of the greatest killers in mortal history, now resident in hell and available in an instructional capacity. Their weapons are quenched in the waters of the river Styx. Their equipment includes stealth generators built on infernal principle that hide them from the sight of God. At the completion of their training, their tongues are ceremoniously removed, for they will never speak of what they learned. They communicate in hand signals. They leave only bodies behind them. The infamous three, Cain, Barabbas, and Haman, killed the three most powerful leaders of the faithful on the same day in 1894. 3 targets, 3 locations, 1 coordinated movement. And then there is Beelzebub's particular contribution to this war. The Black Grail is not a weapon in any sense the word was designed to contain. It is a plague with intent, a curse with direction. When the Lord of the Flies gains sufficient supremacy in the internal politics of hell to deploy it, the gates opens a secondary mouth, and from it pours a wave of demonic vermin, hellflies and scorpions, locusts carrying the infection that Beelzebub breeds in the 7th layer of Inferno. Everything biological that the wave touches is transformed. Villages become pools of melted flesh that are still screaming. Human beings become heralds, winged insect-human hybrids that the Black Grail has built from their bodies. Their original consciousness still present and aware inside the construct, slowly being consumed as fuel. The cult of the Black Grail leads these forces. The Knights of the Order of the Fly, men and women who welcomed this transformation, who stood calmly as the wave came and allowed themselves to be half converted rather than fully consumed, thereby retaining intelligence and memory while becoming something that is entirely no longer human. They lead the Black Grail's advance into the isolated settlements that might otherwise escape. The church burns what it can with holy anointing oil. It has not found a way to burn it all yet. The listener may ask, at this point in the record, how is humanity still standing? It is a fair question. The mathematics of this war, 800 years against an enemy that does not age, does not tire, and draws from a population of the genuinely damned that replenishes itself continuously, suggests an outcome that the evidence seems to contradict. The faithful are still here, the walls still stands, and the record is still being written. The archdevils and the princes of hell are immortal. They existed before there was time, or so the theological accounts hold, and nothing in the available record contradicts those accounts. To beings of that age, 800 years of war is not a campaign. No, it is merely a prologue. They are not trying to conclude this quickly. They are savoring it. The millions of mortal deaths that occur each year in this conflict are not, to the princes of hell, a cost. They are the point. What's more immediately useful to humanity's survival, the archdevils despise each other nearly as much as they despise the faithful. They bicker. They plot among each other. They undermine each other's offensives. They withhold reinforcements from rivals. The unified assault that would, by any military analysis, end this war with a single campaign has never been mounted because these beings, capable of mounting it, cannot maintain a necessary cooperation for long enough. When one of them does gain sufficient supremacy to unify the heretic forces, even briefly, what follows is catastrophic. Constantinople fell. Byzantium was destroyed. The original Antioch was erased, and millions died in the corpse wars. And then, the faithful rebuilt. They always rebuild. Whether this represents nobility or an inability to accept the truth of their situation, the record declines to judge. The record only notes that they have, in fact, continued to rebuild after each catastrophe, and that the walls still stand, and that the gate is still open, and that neither of these facts is likely to change in the future. This is the world as it stands. A world where greed opened the door in 1099 that has not closed since. Where the divine and the infernal are not matters of fate, but of observable military facts. Where the question is not whether God exists, but why. If he does, the world looks the way it looks. Where monks seal themselves inside machines built for suffering, because that is what the war has made of devotion. Where 17 men have been burned inside brass enclosures for almost 800 years, and the record does not know if they can still be saved, or if wanting to save them is still a mercy. A world where a third of humanity has chosen damnation, and the remaining 2/3 have not yet agreed on whether that choice deserves grief or contempt. A world that is still improbably standing. The record will continue. There are individual entries to be written on each faction named here, on the battles that have shaped the front lines into their current positions, on the weapons of this war, and that this war has produced on both sides, and what it cost to wield them, on the figures, human and otherwise, who have become significant enough in the conflict that their names appear repeatedly in the accounts of people who survived long enough to write accounts. There is still much to record. There is always much still to record. I am the last scribe, and the record continues.